Elias Marrow and Jonah Pike thought a night of deep-sea fishing would earn them easy money, but the ocean had other plans. Out there, where the stars vanished and the water turned black, something ancient was waiting. And before dawn broke, both men would learn that the sea doesn't just take lives, it keeps them. That sea stretched endlessly before me, a black sheet of water swallowing the last trace of daylight. I had never been this far from land before, and though I told myself it was only a late-night fishing trip, my stomach twisted with unease. The crew moved quietly around me, their lanterns swaying in the growing darkness, casting warped shadows across the boat. Their silence weighed heavier than the ocean air. Not a single laugh, not a stray word, just the sound of ropes tightening and wood creaking under shifting feet. It felt like even they knew better than to disturb whatever waited out here. The sky above dimmed quickly, clouds rolling over the stars until the world was nothing but shades of black and gray. I listened to the water slap softly against the hull, a steady rhythm that should have been comforting. But each splash echoed hollow, like we were adrift in a place without end. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself and glanced at the compass nailed to the wooden rail. The needle had stopped moving. It didn't spin, didn't point, nor it just sat frozen. No matter how the boat rocked, my heart thudded at the sight, but I told myself it was broken, old equipment on an old boat. Still, I couldn't look away from it, the stillness of that red arrow more terrifying than if it had spun in wild circles. The night carried on without wind, our sails hung limp, the boat crawling forward as though the sea itself decided where we were going. The lantern light flickered against the surface of the water, but no reflection looked back, no stars, no sky, no trace of anything above. Just a bottomless pit, like the ocean had erased the world. Hours passed in heavy silence, my skin prickled as though unseen eyes watched from the waves. Every time I leaned over I saw nothing but black water stretching deep and endless, a curtain I didn't dare imagine parting. Then a sound drifted up through the stillness, faint but unmistakable. At first I thought it was the groan of the boat's wood, but it didn't fade. It grew low and steady, a humming vibration that seemed to rise from the depths. It wasn't a song, not quite, but something close to deep, to constant, like a voice humming from under thousands of tons of water. The sound spread into the wood beneath my feet, rattling the metal bolts and shivering up through my bones. It wasn't loud, but I felt it more than I heard it, like my body had become part of the sound itself. I pressed my hands against the deck, trying to still the tremor in my fingers, but the hum lingered there too. I looked at the others, hoping for some reaction, but they worked on with blank expressions, faces pale in the shifting light. None of them raised their heads, none flinched at the vibration crawling through the air. Their indifference chilled me more than the sound itself. It was impossible they didn't hear it, and yet they moved as if nothing had changed. Leaning over the side, I let my eyes sink into the dark water, searching for the source. The hum grew stronger the longer I stared, as if the ocean itself was pulling me closer. The black surface quivered faintly, disturbed from below. My breath hitched when I thought I saw movement, something pale drifting far beneath the surface. It was gone before I could focus, but the sight pressed fear into my chest. I forced myself to back away, clutching the railing. My pulse hammered in my throat, but I couldn't stop myself from looking again. That's when I saw them eyes a pair, glowing faintly in the abyss, far too deep to be touched by our lanterns. They weren't fish eyes, small and darting. They were huge, wide, and unblinking, locked directly on me. I blinked hard, and the water rippled. For a heartbeat, the eyes vanished, swallowed by the blackness, but I knew what I had seen. The humming didn't fade. It pulsed stronger, almost pleased, vibrating deep enough to shake the breath from my lungs. I gripped the railing until my knuckles went white, forcing myself to stand straight, pretending nothing was wrong. But my mind kept replaying that image, eyes glowing from a depth no light could reach, waiting, watching, patient. The compass needle stayed frozen. The boat drifted onward, and the hum below grew louder. And in that moment, I understood with dreadful clarity. We hadn't sailed into empty waters. We had sailed into something's home. The humming never stopped. It seemed to thread itself into the silence, becoming part of the night. Hours had slipped away, though I couldn't measure them by stars or moonlight. The sky was empty, black and heavy, and the sea below mirrored it perfectly, swallowing every trace of light from our lanterns. The more I stared, the more I felt as if the boat was in tea, floating at all but suspended in a void between sky and sea, a place outside the world I had known. The crew moved like shadows. Their footsteps creaked across the wet wood, their shapes swaying with the boat, but they never spoke, not one word. Their silence was so unnatural that it gnawed at me more than the humming. A fishing trip should have been filled with muttered jokes, tired complaints, or at least the occasional cough. Instead, there was nothing. They worked without looking at each other, without even lifting their eyes. I tried to convince myself that I was only imagining things, that they were simply too focused or too tired. But when I caught a glimpse of their faces in the lantern light, I froze. Their skin seemed pale and clammy, as though they'd been standing in rain for hours, though the air was dry. Their eyes looked glassy, unfocused, like they were awake but not present. I wanted to speak, to break whatever spell gripped them, but the words caught in my throat. Something told me silence was safer. The boat began to move strangely. The waves no longer came in random motions. They rose and fell in a steady rhythm, as though the water itself had found a heartbeat. It wasn't natural. Every rise pushed me forward with unsettling precision. Every fall dragged me back the same way. The thought came unbidden. We were not drifting, we were being carried. I tried to push the idea away, but my body could feel it. The boat's movement was too controlled, too deliberate. Something massive beneath us was dictating the tide. I gripped the railing, heart hammering as the hum grew louder, shaking through the boards and into my chest. It was almost like being rocked to sleep by an unseen hand, but there was nothing comforting about it. The sea had taken control. When I lowered my gaze, I noticed a wet shimmer across the deck. Thin streams of liquid had begun to seep between the planks. At first I thought water was leaking through, but there was no hole, no gap that could explain it. The liquid pooled near my boots, reflecting the lantern light in a strange way. I bent closer, curiosity overtaking fear, and dipped my fingers into it. It was not cold. It was not salty, it was warm. A sick realization struck me as I lifted my hand. The liquid clung to my skin, thick and dark. It was blood. The deck was bleeding. I staggered back, my heart rattling in my chest. The crew didn't even look up. Their feet stepped carefully around the growing pools, as though this was expected. None of them flinched at the sight. None paused to wipe it away. My throat tightened as I tried to make sense of it. Wood doesn't bleed. Boats don't bleed. Yet the pools widened, spreading into thick smears across the deck, staining everything a deep crimson. I pressed myself against the railing, keeping my boots clear of it, afraid to touch any more of it. The smell rose sharp and metallic, coating the back of my tongue, making me want to gag. The hum grew even stronger, and for the first time, I noticed it had a rhythm. It pulsed in sync with the waves and with the spreading blood. I dared a glance over the side. The sea rippled faintly in the lantern light, and again, I thought I saw shapes shifting far below, pale, slow, massive. They glided in circles beneath us, just out of clear view. I couldn't tell how many, but there was more than one. Every ripple seemed to rise from their movement, every pulse of sound vibrating from their presence. The crew lifted their heads at last. Their faces turned toward the water, their eyes empty yet intent. My stomach dropped as I realized they weren't watching the sea, they were listening. The hum had changed into something almost like a call. The crew leaned closer, their lips parted, their faces expressionless. I stayed frozen in place, heart hammering, when suddenly one of them reached down and smeared the blood from the deck across his hands, letting it drip back into the water. The sea swallowed it instantly. The hum grew louder, deep enough to rattle the lanterns against the wood. I shut my eyes and tried not to scream, because in that moment, I was certain of something I could not explain. The ocean was feeding, and we were the offering. The blood spread across the deck as if the wood itself were alive, its veins breaking open beneath our boots. I could feel the heat rising from it, thick and damp, clinging to the night air. The metallic stench grew unbearable, curling in my nose and throat until every breath tasted like rust. My chest ached with each inhale, but I didn't dare move. The crew glided over the stained planks, as though the blood wasn't even there. They stepped around the pools, their eyes fixed on the horizonless blackness, their bodies stiff and swaying with unnatural rhythm. I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't ignoring it. They were obeying something. Their silence no longer seemed like restraint but devotion, as though the humming rising from beneath us had stripped away their voices. I wanted to shout at them, to demand an explanation, but the weight of the air smothered my courage. Every time I opened my mouth, the hum vibrated through my teeth, choking the words back down. The lantern light shook with the boat, and in those flickering shadows, I noticed something horrifying. Their skin wasn't just pale, it was changing. Patches of it glistened wet, as if thin film stretched across their faces and necks. Their lips looked darker, swollen, almost bruised. One of them lifted a sleeve, and I saw the faint shimmer of scales forming across his arm, small and sharp, catching the light like broken glass. My stomach twisted, bile rising, but I forced myself to stay quiet. If I let them see my fear, if I drew attention to myself, I was certain I wouldn't last until dawn. The boat jolted suddenly, a hard shift that nearly sent me sprawling. The water around us rippled violently, though no wind stirred. The humming rose to a pitch that rattled in my skull, and beneath the waves, something stirred. I leaned over the side before I could stop myself, staring down into the abyss. The sea bulged upward, swelling like something massive brushed just beneath the surface. The lantern light caught it, revealing ridges running along the shape, long, jagged, uneven, stretching wider than the boat itself. My mind screamed whale, but I knew better. No whale was ridged like that. No whale made the water shudder with such precision, as if it moved not with instinct but intention. The hum deepened. The deck beneath my feet felt like it was vibrating in time with the rhythm of something's breath. I clutched the railing until my fingers hurt, fighting the urge to leap overboard just to escape that awful resonance. Hours blurred together after that. My sense of time collapsed into the endless pulsing of the sound. I barely noticed when one of the crew leaned over the edge, lowering his face directly into the water. He stayed there, unmoving, his head submerged as if listening to whispers I couldn't hear. I waited for him to lift his face again, desperate for proof that he was still human. When he finally rose, his eyes opened wide, reflecting a sheen too bright, too unnatural. His pupils stretched thin, vertical, reptilian in the lantern light. One by one, the others followed, each bent low, submerging themselves, drinking from the silence below. When they rose again, they were changed. Their breathing had shifted deep and wet, as if their lungs had filled with something thicker than air. Their skin shimmered faintly, rippling as though alive with some new texture beneath the surface. I backed away, my boots sticking to the blood-slicked deck. My thoughts spiraled, panic clawing at me. I was trapped with them, trapped on a vessel being carried somewhere by something enormous. The compass had not moved, the sky remained starless, and the horizon stretched forever in all directions. I could not escape. Then one of them turned, his gaze locking directly on me. For the first time since we had set out, his lips curved upward. Not a smile of joy or recognition, but something stretched too wide, sharp teeth glinting faintly beneath his lips. His stare told me what my heart already knew. I was not a passenger. I was prey. I stumbled back until my shoulders struck the mast, the vibration of the hum still rattling through the wood and into my spine. The others began to gather near the railing, their movements slow and synchronized as though guided by the same invisible hand. Their eyes never blinked, their faces fixed toward the black water. And then, with perfect silence, they began to climb over the side. Not one looked back as they slipped beneath the surface, their bodies vanishing into the endless dark, claimed by whatever called to them. The boat did not sink. It floated as steady as ever, held in place by some unseen anchor below. For a fleeting moment, I thought I was alone, but the hum had stopped, and in the silence that followed, I realized something far worse. The sound I heard now was not humming at all. It was breathing slow, deep, and rising directly beneath me. The silence after the humming ended was worse than the sound itself. It pressed against my ears, heavy and suffocating, as though the world had been emptied of life. I stood in the middle of the deck, blood slick beneath my boots, trying not to breathe too loudly, afraid that even the smallest sound might draw its attention. The sea stretched endlessly around me, black and flat, the horizon swallowed by night. Nothing moved, nothing whispered, nothing lived. Yet I could feel it, the steady, deliberate breath rising from below, shaking the boat in faint, controlled pulses. The air carried a new smell now. Not just salt and iron, but something foul and rotting, like fish left to decay under the sun. It seeped into my lungs with each shallow breath, burning the back of my throat, making me gag quietly into my sleeve. My eyes watered as I tried to hold it back, but the stench seemed alive, forcing its way inside. I wiped at my face with trembling hands, and that's when I noticed something on my skin. The tips of my fingers shimmered faintly in the lantern light, a slickness that didn't wash away when I rubbed at it. Thin lines of texture seemed to ripple beneath the surface of my flesh, shifting when I flexed my hands. My stomach lurched, and I quickly pulled my sleeves down, hiding them from myself as though denying the sight could stop whatever was happening to me. The sea began to bubble in patches around the boat, small circles first, breaking the surface with soft pops, then larger ones, spreading in unnatural patterns. The water hissed faintly each time a bubble burst, as though each carried a whisper too quiet for human ears. I pressed my palms over mine, desperate to block them out, but the whispers seeped in anyway, slipping through the cracks of my mind. They weren't words I could recognize, but I felt their meaning. They were summoning, calling, demanding obedience. The same call the crew had answered before vanishing beneath the waves. The lantern nearest me flickered violently, its flame shrinking almost to nothing. Shadows twisted across the deck, making the pools of blood appear deeper, darker, almost alive. My chest heaved as I tried to keep calm, but the silence kept breaking with faint noises, wet movements. The splash of something brushing the underside of the boat, the low hiss of bubbles bursting in rhythm. Each sound echoed with intent, a message I couldn't understand but instinctively feared. I backed toward the center of the deck, my eyes darting to the rail where the crew had disappeared. The water lapped gently, but in that darkness I thought I saw shapes just below the surface. Not the massive ridges I had glimpsed earlier, but smaller, more human-like forms drifting in slow circles. Pale faces floated upward and then sank again, never breaking the surface. Their eyes wide and open, watching without blinking. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from screaming. They weren't gone. The crew hadn't drowned or vanished. They were waiting just beneath, suspended in the blackness. Their bodies slack and swaying as though the sea itself held them up. Their eyes shimmered faintly, reflecting the lantern light, unnatural and sharp. They were no longer alive, but not dead either. They were something in between, something claimed. My legs shook violently, but I couldn't look away. I thought I saw one of them drift closer to the surface, his face breaking through for only a moment. His mouth hung open, water pouring out as if he had become a hollow shell. Then he slipped back under, vanishing with the rest. The air grew colder, my breath fogged faintly, and the deck seemed to pulse beneath me. The faint lines shimmering under my skin itched, burning with a strange energy I couldn't resist scratching it. When I pulled back my sleeve again, the scales were more obvious now, tiny ridges catching the dim light. My mind spun with terror, but deep inside, another feeling was growing, a pull, an urge to lean over the railing and let the black water claim me. I pressed my back hard against the mast, clinging to the wood, trying to anchor myself against that invisible core. My nails dug into the grain until splinters pierced my skin, but even that pain felt distant compared to the weight pressing down on my thoughts. The whispers filled my head, louder now, clearer. They told me the sea was endless, that it would keep me, that it had always owned me. The boat tilted suddenly, just a small shift, but enough to send one of the lanterns crashing onto the wet deck. For a moment, fire spilled across the blood, flaring bright orange and gold. In that sudden blaze, I saw the truth of what the crew had become. Their pale faces were no longer faces at all. Their skin rippled like scales. Their mouths were jagged with rows of teeth too sharp to belong to humans. Their eyes glowed faint and inhuman beneath the water. They were waiting, patient and hungry. That fire died as quickly as it had sparked, leaving me in near darkness again. Only the faintest glow of the lanterns remained, and a soft hiss of bubbles returned. The whispers grew stronger, crawling under my skin. And then I understood the most terrifying part. The crew had not left me. They were still here, circling beneath the boat, waiting for me to join them. And every breath I took made it harder to resist. The deck was silent except for the faint drip of blood sliding between the planks, dripping back into the sea it came from. I stood frozen, my back pressed against the mast, heart pounding so violently that it seemed louder than the whispers curling around me. The crew's pale faces hovered just beneath the surface, drifting in circles around the boat like living buoys, eyes wide and fixed upward. They were patient, unblinking, as if they knew that eventually I would have no choice but to follow. The night had grown heavier. The sky above had sealed itself into pure black. No stars, no moon, nothing but a suffocating emptiness. It was impossible to tell where sea ended and sky began. For all I knew, we were no longer in the world I had come from. The ocean felt infinite, an endless mouth stretching in all directions, and we were already too deep inside it to escape. I tried to steady myself, but my body was betraying me. My skin itched and burned where the faint shimmer of scales had begun to appear. And no matter how hard I scratched, the ridges only spread. My throat ached, raw and dry, yet when I leaned over the railing I felt a strange craving, not for air, but for water. The whispers rose at that thought, as if they had been waiting for me to realize what I wanted. My fear twisted into something far worse, the suspicion that a part of me was beginning to welcome it. The boat rocked gently, but not from wind or tide. It was deliberate, like the sway of a cradle. Something beneath us was holding the vessel steady, keeping it in place as the faces circled and the whispers grew louder. I pressed my palms to my ears, desperate to block them out, but the voices weren't around me anymore. They were inside, echoing directly in my skull. They told me to stop resisting, that there was no land, no return, only the sea and what waited within it. I looked toward the railing again, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw my own reflection in the water, but it wasn't right. The face staring back looked pale and distorted. Its mouth stretched into a grin I wasn't making, its teeth sharper, its eyes darker. I stumbled back in terror, but the reflection leaned closer, as if rising from beneath. Its lips moved silently, but I didn't need to hear the words to know what it was saying. It was claiming me. It was showing me what I was becoming. My legs buckled and I sank to my knees on the blood-slicked deck. The smell of iron was overwhelming. The taste of salt and decay thick in my mouth. I felt dizzy, my thoughts unraveling, my body too heavy to hold up. Somewhere in the fog of my mind, I realized that the boat was no longer drifting at all. It was tethered, bound to something vast below, as though a colossal hand gripped it tightly. The water around me began to stir. The pale faces sank out of sight, vanishing into the black, leaving the surface rippling with perfect circles. The whispers hushed, replaced by a deeper sound, a breath. Slow, immense, rising closer. I couldn't see it yet, but I felt it, something vast, something ancient, something waiting directly beneath. The lanterns flickered, and one by one, their flames went out. Darkness swallowed the deck until I was left with nothing but the faint shimmer of my own hands, scales glinting faintly as they grew across my skin. My reflection grinned wider from the water, waiting, patient, inevitable. The deck shuddered once more, as though the unseen anchor below had shifted. I crawled to the railing without meaning to, my body moving on its own, drawn to the edge like a moth to flame. The whispers returned, not demanding this time but soothing, coaxing. They told me I would not drown. They told me I would finally belong. I leaned over the side, trembling, staring into the black abyss. The water parted slightly, and for an instant I saw what had been carrying us all along. Not a creature but a mass of ridged flesh, endless in size, stretching beyond sight. And within it, countless eyes blinked open, each one locking on me, wide and hungry. The last of my strength faltered. My grip slipped from the railing. As I fell forward, the sea erupted with pale shapes rushing upward, arms outstretched, faces twisted into grotesque smiles. The crew had been waiting, their mouths open wide, ready to welcome me home. and just before the water swallowed me whole, I felt the terrifying certainty that this was never a fishing trip. It had always been a summons. The ocean had called, and now, at last I was answering.